morning, class, and welcome back to the Nerd Academy Podcast. Hosted by our headmaster, Jared Bachman Stubbs, you can find all of us here at the Nerd Academy Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on our website at www.thenerdacademypodcast.com. Our shows, the Nerd Academy Podcast, Knights of the Nerd Republic, and Campus Life are released weekly at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, check out our Patreon, where every donation helps to keep the lights on.
Hello there, and welcome back to Knights of the Nerd Republic. I am your host, Jared the Dark Jedi Bachman Stubbs, and we have a very special episode for you guys this week. I told the rest of the team, take the morning off, don't worry about it, because I am going to have a very fun interview with Mr. Jamie Dew of the Star Wars Duel of the Fates podcast miniseries. Jamie, how you doing, bud?
I am great. How are you doing, Jared?
I am fantastic. Even better now that we were able to get this episode off the ground. Having lots of fun fighting the computer. But we're here and we are ready to talk about your incredible show. I've listened to all 3 episodes that are out so far. Very much enjoying it. I said this whenever we started up, and I will reiterate it. These are one of those moments where, like, I first saw Steele Saunders tweet about your show, and I was like, oh, that's so good. Why the fuck didn't I think of that? And it was just that immediate, like, oh, this is such a great concept. So, yeah, if you want to let the people know what you got going on, and then I really want to get into the weeds of Duel of the Fates.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I am a podcast producer out of Toronto, Ontario in Canada. I've been dabbling in podcasts for the better part of 10 years, but I've been, more serious about it in the last 7. I've done a range of different types of series. I've got, one on my own mental health. I've got a lot of pop culture stuff, including music and film and television. But the one that I'm most proud of at this moment is the Duel of the Fates podcast, for sure. So you can find everything that I do at a place called Dewvre.com. That's DEWVRE.com.
Yeah, and I will be honest, I haven't had a chance to check out your other work yet, but I very much would like to after hearing Duel of the Fates so far. So I have to ask, with Duel of the Fates up top, how are you?
Sure.
Where are you at with the sequel trilogy? I know there's everybody has some very, very strong opinions about these movies. I like the sequels quite a lot. The Last Jedi ended up becoming my favorite Star Wars movie, personally. I have very, very mixed opinions on The Rise of Skywalker, however, and I want to know where you fall in the sequel trilogy.
Sure. No, I think that's a great question. And I think the best way to put it for me is I'm a fan of Star Wars. I'm just a big fan of the property in general. And the sequel trilogy for me was something very exciting. I have 2 young daughters, so it was something that I was going to get to enjoy with them. And The Force Awakens was, of course, the first one that we saw, and having a female-centric character was, heartening for me to again have my daughters have somebody that they could relate to in person. But there was a lot of really strong supporting characters in that film as well. It's not like it hangs on Daisy Ridley. It's a real ensemble again, and I think that was really great. I think that The Last Jedi is also, of the Disney era, it's my favorite film.
A man of culture.
Followed closely by Rogue One, and then maybe Solo after that, Force Awakens, and then Rise of Skywalker for me is the weakest link of the Disney era. But I still really enjoyed it. I thought, I had a giant bucket of popcorn, and I devoured that fucking popcorn and watched that film with my kids, and we liked it. We liked what we saw. But to be honest with you, when I started hearing about the Trevor leaks, it was intriguing to me to maybe take another look at what could have been. I'm not lamenting the Rise of Skywalker, but or disparaging it in any way, but I think that there is kind of a neat alternative here that we have access to in a world sort of like that Gwyneth Paltrow movie, Sliding Doors. It's just an alternate.
Yeah.
It's an alternate dimension that we're getting to look into and see what if.
Yeah, and I love the hearing about the goings on behind the scenes of the Star Wars movies. There's a reason why almost every single Star Wars movie has a making of documentary attached to it on home release.
Yeah, we really eat that stuff up, don't we?
Yeah, and because there's so much that goes on, like it's a breaking like nerd culture story. Anytime that like an old storyboard that nobody's seen before from the prequels shows up on the internet,
That's right.
All the comicbook.coms and colliders and whatever, all of it comes to a screeching halt to be like, oh hey, in the original screenplay for Revenge of the Sith, Padme brought a knife to Mustafar. And that's all we talk about for a week is Padme tried to shank Anakin in George Lucas's original script. And it's just an all-consuming thing. And then, we get an entire screenplay of a movie that got scrapped.
Yeah.
And that was another question I wanted to ask you that you actually answered before I could ask it. And clearly you're on a roll. I felt some very strong opinions when I first got my hands on Duel of the Fates. As somebody who, for me personally, The Rise of Skywalker falls apart in its third act. There's some rough moments throughout. However, I think the movie really falls flat on its face during the final confrontation with Palpatine. I think that whole sequence is very poorly blocked and executed. Like taking Ben off the board completely for the final battle. Stuff like that just completely boggles my mind. And I really, really like the direction that Duel of the Fates kind of took that conflict in with the First Order and this idea. It was on Talking Fates, the most recent one of that. I can't remember who said it, but the fact that the Resistance's fight against the First Order feels more like the French Revolution.
Yeah, that did come up, didn't it? That was really interesting to hear. I'm not as versed on. Well, it's been a long time since I took European history. Let's put it that way. I'm an old man, so that one flew over my head a little bit. But if you can expand on it, that would be great. But I do think that it feels more rooted in conflict. I think that there was more time to germinate, frankly. I think my biggest beef with Rise of Skywalker, now that I've had access to the Trevorrow and Connolly script, is the amount of time that takes place between The Last Jedi and the final film.
Yeah. With
Duel of the Fates, it feels as though it's been 6 or 7 years, and the Resistance has built up again, and they have more of a fighting chance. Whereas with Rise of Skywalker, it's something that almost happens immediately after. It seems like almost immediately after, and just there's a question that I have for the folks at Lucasfilm. It's like that territory between those two films could have been really rich and fertile area for storytelling in the future had they left a more lengthy gap there,
Absolutely.
And let our friends become better friends, that sort of thing. And I think that stuff pays off in the Connolly and Trevorrow script for sure.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think the best example you can make is the Clone Wars only canonically lasted 3 years. How much content has been mined from a 3-year war?
Just staggering amount.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Like countless comics and novels, not to mention an award-winning television series.
Right.
So there's a lot there to work with. So you said the time gap is an issue for you. That's another thing I agree with. I think that they could have expanded on that as well.
And to be, just to be fair to JJ and Disney and, all the people that worked really hard on Rise of Skywalker, that wasn't a complaint that I necessarily came out of the theater with. Again, I came out of the theater mostly, I scratched my head a little bit, but mostly I was satisfied with a Star Wars film. I wasn't satisfied with the buildup that they gave it. I mean, this is the end of a generation, the end of, like, that's a monumental task that they gave this film. Mm-hmm. And they gave them less time to work on the film than they normally would have, because, JJ was rushed to production. I don't understand why they didn't literally give him another year, to sort of flesh things out a little bit more. We know he's capable.
Yeah.
There are people that have beefs with him for sure, but we know, Force Awakens is a fun movie. And I'm just, there's some things that happen that don't quite make sense. And I think that what we're seeing right now with Lucasfilm putting the brakes on the motion picture, for a couple of years, my hope is that up top they're really being planful and thinking about what this property can generate in the future and what it can look like in the future, and being real planful about that. That would be wonderful. That would be a wonderful thing. But I think 10 years from now, I think we're going to watch The Rise of Skywalker and enjoy it. Maybe not as much as we did with Return of the Jedi or Revenge of the Sith, the last chapter in the other trilogies. But it's a fun movie.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I do quite enjoy it. And I make this joke to my friends a lot, where like I'm the sole person in our little unit who is okay with admitting that they like Batman v Superman. I know it's not a great movie. I'm very aware of the fact that it is not good, but I love it unapologetically.
Sure.
And I make the joke to them all the time. I'm like, okay, go back and look at IMDb. Oh, hey, hi, Chris Terrio. Thank you for pricking every single movie that I like and giving me this really weird mixed bag every time. But no, I totally agree with that, and that's just something that I'm really looking forward to, is this way that the prequels kind of went on this interesting redemption tour. Once people my age who grew up on them, became old enough for their voice to be heard on the internet.
That's exactly what's happened. I'm 46, and for me, seeing the prequels, it was disappointing. Like, it was disappointing at the time. Again, I like Star Wars, so I enjoyed the movies. I can live in a world where I'm disappointed by something, but it doesn't mean it's terrible. It was just more than I was expecting at the time. I expected it to have a look and a feel that it didn't necessarily have, but I've come to rather enjoy them. Again, watching them with my children, they love them. So I love that.
Yeah, and I had a similar experience. I'm 22, and my little sister, she's 8, and we she kind of had that, oh, well, you like all this nerdy stuff, I want to give it a shot too. And, oh, of course, I will very happily indoctrinate you at a very early age. And a few years ago, we sat down to watch all the Star Wars movies leading up to The Last Jedi when that was coming out, and she was really enjoying it, and obviously because of how not incredibly diverse the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy are, the fact that she would immediately latch on to Leia and Padme, and they didn't have quite as much to do as Luke or Han or Obi-Wan or Anakin respectively, but they had their very, very definitive moments and times in that spotlight, and she loved it. Sequel trilogy rolls around. This little girl is in love with Rey in a way that just warms my heart. And in the same way you were saying with your little girls, that is just such this amazing thing that even if there are elements of the sequel trilogy and the Rise of Skywalker in particular that I have a whole lot of mental gymnastics to kind of try to be okay, this is what this means, I guess. Knowing how much Rey lands with my little sister, that is everything I need to recognize how important these movies are.
Yeah.
And one of my closest friends, who we just brought into our little podcast network. My friend Alexis, she's ever since she was a kid liked Star Wars, and getting to see The Force Awakens in the theater, Rey was kind of her like, oh, I'm in character. And that just made me happy because I got to see two different people from two very different age groups have this same reaction to this character. And it was in that moment where I was like, oh my God, I am so happy for the both of you. Like, you found like Star Wars hooked you now. Like you're like you caught the drug. Like you're addicted to this shit now. There's no coming back from this. Like there's no coming back. You've made a horrible life decision, but it's a beautiful one. And
right.
we welcome you with open arms into our little cult. But no, I think it's very important, and I love seeing that. Again, the work you and your whole team are doing with bringing to life an alternative version of the story. Aside from the time gap, are there other elements to the narrative that you prefer over The Rise of Skywalker, or vice versa?
Well, I guess it depends. Are we talking spoilers here? How familiar with the script are you, or your listeners? Do we want to keep them, sort of where we're at? We're getting ready to release episode 4, and there's 9.
Okay, here's what I will do. We can be vague for a little bit, and then
Sure.
later on we can get into the spoilers. I know everything that happens in Duel of the Fates.
Sure. Okay. No, that's fair.
We've spoken kind of freely about it in past episodes on this show, but in the event that there are people who listen to you guys, who come to listen to this interview, who aren't familiar with the script, I don't want to take that chance, and I'm glad you brought that to my attention.
Sure. No problem at all. I think thematically, there are issues that dovetail really nicely from The Last Jedi. And, it's no surprise that Connolly and Trevorrow were writing this script using the Johnson draft, using his finished script that he was using in production. And Johnson wrote his draft while JJ was in production. So they were in sort of this weird echo chamber, and they didn't necessarily have any of this toxic, negative vibe happening about, the product that they were creating.
Absolutely.
Which I think ultimately we saw with The Last Skywalker. I think that there were some things in there that, and I don't blame them for it. It's human nature. I think they were trying to make some fixes. I think they were trying to bandage up some wounds for the fan base, and that's their choice. It's their property, and that's fine. But I think that the Duel of the Fates script, and again, it's a very early draft, so it could have looked a lot different when they actually went to production. I think it's the second draft that we have. And there's rumors now that there's another draft out there. There's rumors. I was just reading on Reddit the other day that there is the person who dropped this script says he has another one, or says they have another script, and they might drop it. And
Robert Meyer Burnett better keep his inbox open.
That made me so sad, because I was just like, oh my gosh, we put a lot of work into this, and we can't necessarily do it again if it's radically different. But maybe we'll do a special edition where we change a few scenes or whatever. But anyway, I think that the themes from The Last Jedi, like I think Luke's redemption, and where he lands as a Force ghost. We've already seen him up here in Duel of the Fates, and he's now a pretty strong Force ghost, sort of haunting Kylo Ren and making his life miserable. And I think that's really great. He's also worked with Rey. So for a lot of the people that have an issue with Rey having Force powers that she didn't necessarily train for, well, that's addressed, because she's been working with Luke, and to an extent she's been working with Leia, not just a matter of weeks, but for potentially years, because again, we don't know how many years have passed. I want to say it's 6 or 7 years have passed since The Last Jedi and Duel of the Fates, where it's less than a year for The Rise of Skywalker. So she's a powerful Jedi now. And I think that that's something that's really great as well. She's more sure of herself, and there's less of that unassuredness, that she sort of is Rey's hallmark in the new trilogy. She's always sort of second guessing herself. She has a moment of doubt in this script, but it's I don't know. It's a nice launching off point. That's really all I can sort of muster at this point.
Oh no, I like a lot of what you're saying, because I agree with you a lot in parts. I think for me, my biggest issues with the Duel of the Fates was a lot of it came from the concept art, and some of like the aesthetics of the movie weren't kind of vibing with me. And a lot of it just had to do with like I didn't like that Rey was basically like cosplaying Luke in Return of the Jedi. Like,
I love that.
So I think
I love that scene where she's a Tusken Raider and then she drops. Like, that to me is really a nice callback to Return of the Jedi. That whole scene with Poe and Rey, or Poe and Finn and Rey, where they're sort of caught in danger, and it's like, what's going to happen? And oh my gosh, there's this Tusken Raider that's chasing them as well, and suddenly the Tusken Raider drops the robes, and it's like you can almost picture R2-D2 shooting her her new lightsaber, and she displays it just like he displayed his green one.
Oh yeah.
Like it thematically, again, it's really, it pushes those buttons. For me, I saw a Jedi in the theater for my 10th birthday, and
wow.
that was like, oh my God, we left the theater just like over the moon. Like we all wanted the Force. Like that was just the nuttiest day ever that I can remember.
Oh, and I don't blame
so
you
I can
for
picture
it, yeah.
people. I can picture people having that moment with Rey when she, she drops those robes and she's wearing all black and she unfurled this, double-bladed blue lightsaber. It's like, and she just kicks fucking ass.
Yeah, no,
saves her pals, and
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I got super into like the aesthetic of Rey's look in The Last Jedi, especially. So I was hoping for more robes, and I quite like her outfit in The Rise of Skywalker. And I understand the mentality of liking the black jumpsuit, and I don't begrudge you that. I just, in my mind, I was like,
sure, no, that's
yeah.
fair.
And I think that's one of the things I really like about talking about like the whole Duel of the Fates versus The Rise of Skywalker thing, is that for me, again, not getting super specific with the plotting of Duel of the Fates quite yet, is that for me, I think a marriage of the two would make for the perfect final chapter.
Sure.
Like, I think if you take a little bit of Duel of the Fates and drop it into The Rise of Skywalker, and take some chunks of The Rise of Skywalker and drop them into Duel of the Fates, like, that's great. Like, this version of the Knights of Ren,
great.
Chef's kiss. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Even down to the names. Like, I could listen to the name Hadaska like as its own podcast. Just an hour of hearing that name is just music to my ears. I love all of that so much. Yeah,
it's pretty badass. And the way, we'll get into that later. I think that is, really great. Whereas Skywalker, we just sort of get that silhouette of them on the thing. But apparently, JJ had to trim a lot of stuff. So maybe that was some of the stuff that he trimmed from Rise of Skywalker. Maybe that's some of the stuff that he ultimately trimmed. Who's to say? Well, I mean, we live in an era now where things are released and there are, new cuts of scripts of movies coming out and, all sorts of stuff. So maybe we'll see something down the road that is more true to what JJ wanted. Because there were rumors at the time that it was going to be close to 3 hours, and it ended up coming in at well under 2.5.
It's only about like 2.25.
That's a lot of stuff that they had to trim around, Like, I mean, you think right from the very beginning, there's exposition in the crawl, and typically the crawl sets the scene, but not in a really tipping of the hand kind of way. You think A New Hope is the first film that we ever see, and it sets the stage, but it doesn't do something as dramatic as, say, the dead speak. Right? Like, it's like, oh, wait a minute, this character that has been dead for 3 movies is now back. That's an interesting choice. I don't have a problem with it. And even if I did have a problem with it, who cares? Like, I'm just a Star Wars, man. Like,
Oh yeah,
we need to live in a world where it's like, our opinions don't, really matter to a hill of beans. They're just there. But it's an interesting choice. But it's an even more interesting choice that we don't get to see that breadcrumbed out over two movies or even the first act of the first movie. Like, so that we're surprised. It's like, nope, Palpatine's in this. He's gonna be here.
yeah.
Like, interesting.
And I kind of want to see, like, and there's a debate as to how long Disney's going to wait to take a stab at doing episode 10 or whatever. There is a part of me that is very curious about what the what hard exposition we could ever see in a crawl after that. Because like you said, like, it's very good scene setting. It's very okay. The rebels are on the run. And
That's right.
Stuff like that, where with here, it's like, okay, we're going to bring you up to date completely as to what happened in the last year. Palpatine is back from the dead. Kylo is spiraling out of control, and Rey wants to be a Jedi. You knew that? Okay, here we go to Mustafar.
That's right, yeah.
And you're right, there's a whole lot of hard exposition. So I kind of wonder, like, if that would be the only one of its kind that recognizes we have to streamline this very quickly.
Well, and again, maybe that crawl came as part of the trimming. Like,
Yeah.
maybe there was some narrative. Like, I have to think that the stuff on Mustafar was, more substantial than just, a bunch of cutscenes. I have to think that. Like, it doesn't mean that it was bad what we got. It's just an interesting choice.
No, I agree with you, and I think that as somebody who, before the new movies, my favorite character was Vader / Anakin, and by The Last Jedi, absolutely Kylo Ren / Ben Solo became my favorite character. So you would not find me complaining about getting more time on Mustafar with our beautiful bouncing dark Jedi.
That's right.
And I'd love to see more of that. And I also want to call attention to just the voice cast you have going for this show is so good. And
thank you.
I absolutely, just find myself sucked in. I listen to a lot of Star Wars audiobooks, and this feels just like one. I'm enjoying all of the performances so much, and absolute kudos to everybody involved.
They worked really hard, and they brought a lot to the table. And I'm really proud of the work they did, and and they continue to do. They're promoting the podcast and showing up on Talking Fates and doing fun stuff like that. So really cool.
Absolutely, and their hard work shows. I do want to say now, so anybody who is not familiar with the Duel of the Fates screenplay and is experiencing that screenplay for the first time via this show, thank you very much for listening. We're honored that you have joined us. Now might be a good time to hit the pause button and come back to this once you're finished out with all 9 episodes. However, I do kind of want to start talking ahead of where the story is at, if that is okay with you, my friend.
Yeah, for sure.
Excellent. So, where do you fall between the final confrontations between each movie and kind of like the plotting of character moving forward? Like, versus The Rise of Skywalker? Because I just find, like, comparing these two movies fascinating in the way that, like, you can tell the stuff that made its way from Tyros to Duel of the Fates. Like, the whole idea that there is a holocron and it's a Wayfinder versus a holocron, whatever. And, there's certain elements to the stories that kind of carry over. How do you feel about the finale of Duel of the Fates?
Okay, so to add a precursor to that, I'm a fan of the Clone Wars, so I love that Mortis is in play. I love that we bring Mortis to the big screen. And it's a Mortis that is very different than we saw in the Clone Wars. Clearly, the father has passed, and it is, the thrones are up for grabs. And I think that coming into the final battle, I think you have more motivation in Duel of the Fates. I don't quite know what Rey's motivation for showing up on Exegol was necessarily. She was there to stop Palpatine, and she knew that she was a Palpatine, and that would be difficult for her because I guess she's always searched for family, and now she knows who her family is, and she's faced with having to destroy them, which is sort of a play on what Luke needed to do. But what does it do for her? What's her journey? Like, where does that take her? And if I'm missing something big, then, well, if people are listening to this going, it's this, you idiot, then that's fine. I just didn't pick up anything there. Whereas, in the Trevorrow script, I feel like it's really obsessed with balance. Like, she is obsessed with moving away. Like, let's kill the past. Again, we're staying with let's kill the past. She talks about, and I was talking to Shelby, who plays Rey, earlier today, and she says one of her favorite lines is, let me just quickly pull it up. One of her favorite lines is, our masters were wrong. And I love that. I love that Shelby pulled that from the script as one of her favorite lines, because I feel like that's sort of where Rey is at. Rey is her own self, and she is trying to do things differently, whereas Luke needed to he didn't really know why, like, how it was going to bring balance to the Force, because he thought he could redeem his father, and his father would live, and they would both be light, and everything would be good. Whereas the Trevorrow version of balance here, it seems as if there's a little bit more give and take there. It's like we've all got good in us, we've all got evil in us. We need to embrace that and move on. And there needs to be a paradigm shift here, because whatever we've been doing for 1,000 years isn't working. And when she uses Force Lightning to kill Hadassah Wren, that is really, I can imagine how badass that scene would have been, because boy, oh boy, Poe and Chewie are shocked to see her use, lightning, lightning power.
I'll be sure that Joel or Travis or whoever edits just puts a nice ba-dum-tis on there for you. Shocked. I like that.
yeah. I didn't even think about that. So yeah.
Pardon me for that. I apologize. I completely threw off your rhythm for a very shitty pun. Continue.
Hey, there's nothing but shitty puns, and they're all amazing. If that makes any sense.
No, I know exactly what you mean. I appreciate you.
I think that. So I think coming up to that, final battle with Kylo, she's unsure sort of what she needs to do. There's almost a greater parallel between her going into her final battle. There's a greater parallel with the end of Harry Potter than there is to, Jedi or Sith, like Revenge of the Sith or Return of the Jedi.
No, you're absolutely right. Like, I completely agree with you.
She needs to go to this new place, this different place, which is it death? I don't even know. Like, where is she? Like, is she there with Ezra somewhere?
Yeah.
I think it's really cool, and I would have loved to have seen it on the big screen, but we didn't get it, and that's fine. We'll listen to it on the old iPhone or Android phone.
It's very interesting stuff, and it's almost like a, as a comic book guy as well, like it's like reading an Elseworld story.
Okay.
It's almost, and granted this is more like a radical alternate reality type thing, but it's almost like reading like the Flashpoint Justice League stuff. Where
right.
like Rey is this, not absolutely cringed out version of a gray Jedi. She's having these actual conversations about the dark side and the light and what balance really means, and all of this stuff is happening, and it's almost like okay, Batman is Thomas Wayne now, and Martha Wayne is the Joker, and Bruce Wayne got shot. Like it's almost that like jarring, like okay, we need to take all of this in, and this is so very different, and the differentness is kind of the draw.
Yeah.
I again, as somebody who loves Kylo Ren, I love his character in Duel of the Fates. I love him in Rise of Skywalker as well. But like his, the bearded and weary, I love that so much. Like that's all you need. That is all you need. Is that like he has gone from, and I love the way that the gentleman who played Kylo and Hux talked about it on Talking Fates. But that level of, okay, I got to psych myself up that like, he's pretending to be something that he isn't.
Right.
At his core, Ben Solo is not this horrific dark side warrior. He has been abused and conned into being that.
Right.
And that's one thing that I like about The Rise of Skywalker a little bit more than Duel of the Fates is the fact that like it gave Ben what I had always interpreted his character to have been, which is that like he knows he's not this thing and he didn't even choose to be this thing, but it's all he kind of has left. Where like with Duel of the Fates, he kind of like really doubles down on it.
Right.
And like that, like bearded and weary has a lot to do with the like he just wants to just finally achieve it. Where with by the time of The Rise of Skywalker, it feels like he's only doing it because he's just empty and has nothing else left to him than becoming the supreme leader of the galaxy,
Yeah, it doesn't seem like that's his bent, right? Like he doesn't really have a great deal. Like he wants to be powerful.
Yeah.
But he doesn't necessarily know what he wants to use this power for.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily galactic dominance. It's potentially something else.
Yeah.
We don't quite find out. I liken the very end of the final battle between he and Rey to Maul and Obi-Wan in the episode of Rebels.
Yeah.
When they have their final battle, and he doesn't necessarily concede his alter ego until it's done. And then he, like Maul sort of puts his head on Obi-Wan and, just wants to know, is he the one? Like, is this, will he bring balance to the Force? Like, is this the one that's going to finally beat Palpatine for me? And if so, I guess that's okay. And I feel like Kylo, when he utters, her family name to her, that's him conceding, at that point as well. And he doesn't have his redemption until the very end. So for me, I like that a little bit better. Like I didn't necessarily need him to be redeemed and then save the day. It was okay for him to have redemption on her, on his deathbed,
Yeah, I think that would probably be the biggest point of contention between us on that is that it broke my heart to see him die, period. And then the fact that like he didn't get to live and continue cleaning up his mess. Because then that was my big thing for Rise of Skywalker, where I was like, I don't want this to end in death. Clearly I didn't get that. But I do think it's still fascinating nonetheless. And, just this idea of like Kylo Ren becoming, because he has a very regal, like he's not Count Dooku regal, but there's like, he's kind of this like dark side perversion of the chivalric knight in a way.
You'll have to explain that reference. I don't know it.
No, just that very like medievally, like, it's like the flowing robes and the tunic and the cape. Like he's kind of this like dark space wizard version of Lancelot almost.
Gotcha.
He has that very knightly energy all the way down to his lightsaber and just the way that he carries himself. And to see that all go down the toilet in Duel of the Fates, and it's just him strung the hell out. Like, I need to find this fucking holocron, man. I can't keep doing this shit, man. That's just kind of, is that where he's at? Where like, I love that. I love this idea of like, seeing how this war has kind of broken everybody down a little bit, like I think it's an interesting character choice to have Leia just kind of be like, yeah, I know he's gone. It hurts to hear that. And I like how in The Rise of Skywalker, Leia she makes her final push to bring him home.
Right.
But, you see that, Finn trying to the stormtrooper revolt. There's a lot here that I love because you truly get to see how these people have all been molded by this conflict.
Yes. And the fact that they give Finn something meaty to do and it ties in with the first film, kudos. That's great. It makes sense.
I also wanted to ask, is there what is the, I'm not even sure I have the words for it, quite frankly. Is there a push to maybe do this with other content, maybe this format, to maybe see if I don't even know if original drafts for the other movies exist out there. Would you ever attempt to do this for the other films, or?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I hadn't really considered it in terms of this property, mainly because it is someone else's property ultimately.
Yeah.
And we are walking a tightrope. We hope that we can put out all 9 episodes, but there is a reality where we might get asked to stop. And if so, then we'll do so. We're not a band of rebels here. We will comply with the copyright and do what we need to do. But we've done our best to differentiate. Initially this was going to be scored by me, and it was going to be scored with John Williams score. I would just pick and choose the various songs that I wanted to use. Where we landed though was we got somebody who's really talented and who wanted to give it a try, because it's not something that he's done on this scale before. And I think that it's worked really wonderfully. I think the score adds such, initially this was going to be just a raw table read. That's all it was going to be. Then I thought I would add sound effects. Then I thought I would add a score. I never thought in a million years that the SFX would be as good as they are. I never thought in a million years that we would have a score that is heightening and making this property stand out the way it is. But to get back to your question, we would probably avoid someone else's material in the future.
Which makes sense. Yeah, I don't begrudge you that. That's.
But
a very logical answer.
Something that's been produced already. I don't know how that would. The contentious issue with this is that this is unproduced. And that's what makes it, a little bit more contentious, because not only does it belong to somebody else, but it is, it was, not meant to be seen. And that's, sort of where we're at with this. One of the other properties, like Jedi, let's say, for example, an early draft of Jedi or something like that, we could probably do, because, it has been seen and it is out there and people do make fan fiction, and it is a more clear-cut definition of what fan fiction is.
Yeah.
But I think our aim would be to do something that we own, that is our content, and go from there. But never say never. Like I said, there's another draft of the script out there, so who knows?
Yeah.
And this was also a COVID
thing.
This was also a COVID project. This was also a test to see if we could do something like this with everybody being isolated. I mean, not one person has been in the same room with I edit, I do the narration. I directed people when we were recording, but nobody was in the same room. We did everything virtually, and we cast virtually, we recorded virtually, we send files back and forth. It's been added a layer of work to it for sure, but it's been sort of a fun trip to see if we could do it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I remember back in the day, I was with another podcasting network, and we all lived in different parts of the state, if not the country for some people. And eventually I started bringing some of my more local friends into the fold, and I got to the point where I was actually able to record with people in the same room, and that was a dream.
Oh, it's so nice,
And then
right?
and then we went off. We started the Nerd Academy stuff, and then COVID hit, and I'm like, oh, I'm back to recording with people. I'm back to like just talking to a wall about Space Wizards. So no, I feel that, and it's been very strange, not having all the people right next to you anymore. But it's a very excellent project you guys have going on. And one last question, and
Sure.
maybe this has been brought up before, and I didn't catch it. Are you guys going to be doing like a super cut of all the episodes in one episode?
I hadn't considered that. So it sounds like a great idea, though.
I was just curious
It
because I
sounds
know
like a wonderful idea. If I could find my host only allows me to, I would have to look at the cap of a file that I'm allowed to upload to my host, and get the project underneath that window. But if I could do that, then I think we definitely would put it out as one thing. Yeah. So I'm deciding right here on the fly. Yeah, that would be something we would do for sure.
Cool. Knights of the Nerd Republic exclusive for you guys right here.
There you go.
Anyway, I just want to say for the upteenth time, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for working on this amazing project. I am enjoying the hell out of it. I am very much looking forward to the final battle episodes, especially getting into all hell breaking loose on Coruscant.
Yeah.
And obviously, lightsaber duel on Mortis. You can't beat that. Jamie, my friend,
that's going to be great.
where can the lovely people find you and your work one more time?
I think, we'll talk just about this property right now, and your best place to go would be duelofthefates.ca. So it's not .com, it's .ca. Duelofthefates.ca, and there you can subscribe and you'll get the episodes weekly. They come out on Mondays, and then we do a fun after show, and they come out on Sundays. They come out the Sunday following the episode, and it's called Talking Fates, and we have some great help from the people over at Star Wars TV Talk, and they interview and break down They break down the episode, and they interview a cast member about their appearance in that episode and the project as a whole.
Again, tune into all of it. It's all a lot of fun, and very much looking forward to having it all in one place and ready to experience a version of Episode 9 that almost was. Again, it's such a cool project, and I am enjoying every second of it. You guys I'm sorry, I keep accidentally cutting you off.
I'm just glowing here. Thank you so much. It's so nice to hear. Again, being in isolation, you don't hear a whole lot, right? So
yeah,
it's really nice to hear somebody that is enjoying it for sure. So thanks.
No, again, thank you. I've been telling everybody else on the team, I'm like, you got to listen to this shit. This is so good. You guys can find myself on Instagram and Twitter at DarkJedi2552. You guys can find the Nerd Academy podcast on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and on our website, www.thenerdacademypodcast.com, where if you're feeling generous, you can toss in a few credits to our Patreon and help us keep the lights on around here. We have a new episode of the Versus series coming to you guys this week on Patreon. Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Mace Windu this month.
That's cool.
Yeah. Spencer and I are recording that one tonight, actually. So very much looking forward to the second episode of our Patreon Versus series. With that, we are honored that you have joined us. Thank you for listening, and may the Force be with you always.